Yo guys, welcome back to another simple how-to animation. Today we're going to be taking a look at the wind chime flip. So yeah, let's get started and let's jump right into it. Alright, so as you can see here, what I've done is basically illustrated out the main points, the main keyframes of the animation that we're going to be doing. So it starts here in the normal position, and then it's going to start to turn, it's going to flip over, we're going to have the figure 8 shape here going on, and then it's going to go super horizontal, basically becoming a slit when it's turning over, and we're going to just kind of exaggerate that a little bit to give it that nice flipping effect. Then it's going to come out on the other side, basically doing the reverse of that figure 8 shape that we had before, flipping over and then eventually getting back to what is essentially the starting position. So yeah, let's jump into it and start getting in some of the in-betweens and keyframes. Alright, so you can see here I have a pre-made demonstration animation that I'd like to show first, and let's take a look at it. Now you can see it's just animating those first illustrated keyframes that I showed you in the beginning. And you can see here how it's flipping, it hits all those points, and it's just looping over and over again. And I'm working on Clip Studio Paint on my iPad Pro here. And as you can see down here in the timeline, I have different folders made for each section, but it's pretty simple. We're mostly just working with one folder, one separate layer for the paper flipping. And we're going to be animating mostly on 2s and 3s. This is just a 40 frame loop going on here, and we'll get into more details as we start doing some of the in-betweens. Now you can see here I have a separate one made for us to work on, and this has just some of the keyframes left over from the original animation, and some of the keyframes are actually missing as well because I think they're important. I wanted to go over animating those to show how I did it and maybe give a few tips and tricks. So yeah, let's jump into starting the in-betweening and working on the keyframes, and hopefully you'll get some tips and tricks that'll help you make an animation like this, or if you're just curious to see how I did it, that's good too. So let's get started. Alright, so you can see here I actually have the wind chime on a completely separate folder, separate layer, because it's just static the whole time. We're not actually going to be animating the wind chime moving. That is a nice little touch you could do if you want to do something like that, but for this tutorial we're just focusing on the paper, doing a little flip and looping like that. So the main folder, the main thing I'm going to be focusing on is just the frames with the paper, and you can see here, like I said before, this one is missing a bunch of the keyframes and has almost none of the in-betweening in there. So what we're going to do is start working on that, and one thing that we can use is a guide. So I mentioned this in my leaves, the falling leaves simple animation how-to, so you can definitely check that video out too if you're interested. But having some sort of guideline so this is basically just the first frame here, and the red layer that you see, that's just going to help us keep the proportions and the shape and the size of the little paper flag the whole time as we're animating, so that we don't end up later on in the animation, we don't gradually shrink it or get bigger. We want to make sure that we're keeping things consistent as possible. So this is a great little tip. I always try and use these whenever I can. They help with things that are in motion, so if you need a point A to a point B, or just keeping proportions and size, I can't recommend using little guide layers like this enough. So yeah, let's start doing some of the in-betweening and work our way to the other keyframes that we need to work on. Alright, so with my guide layer on in the background, I'm here on my main folder, on the main layer that we're going to be working on. I also turned on my onion skin, so we can see the frames that are further ahead, and it's going to help us adjust and get to that point. So the first keyframe is on this 4th frame here, and one extra thing I'm going to do for this tutorial is I have a separate layer underneath that actually has, in this pink color here, that has the frames from the demonstration one that I drew there, so we can follow along those. And it's just going to help us make this more smooth and get through it more quickly, so I can give you more of the tips and tricks on what I did instead of just watching me basically reanimate the whole thing. So let's get started, and we can turn it on and off as we need it. So let's look. First, you can see what we're going to do is we're going to start angling the paper so that it kind of tilts a little bit and goes up, and then we're going to get this kind of swooping in motion here that's going to start the flip of the paper. So here first you can see we're just going to go, what we're doing is tilting it a little bit. Sorry if my lines aren't the straightest or most perfect. Trying to do this while talking and explaining things is a little difficult. So then we're going to do just a little bit more, and you can see just by tilting the line of the paper right there, it can have a big effect on giving that feeling of motion. It's really going to give it the effect that it's starting to tilt. And so now we're at the 4th frame. Looks pretty good. I'll drag my timeline thing over here, take a look. And it's always good to be flipping back and forth, making sure that your frames are looking as smooth as possible. And I think I didn't mention this before, but we're working on 24 frames per second here. Alright, so that looks pretty solid so far. And then the next thing, this is the first really big keyframe, honestly. And what we're going to be doing here is getting that figure 8 motion here that is really fun. Gives it kind of like the 3-dimensional shape, kind of potato chip shape as well. I'm not sure, I forgot the string there on this one. Okay, so there's a few different ways you can do this kind of figure 8 shape, and as you can see I kept it almost like I guess it would be almost like the paper is top heavy a little bit, or only the bottom part. It's not a perfectly even figure 8 like that. I think that looks a little bit less realistic, and while you might see it actually do that sometimes, I think there's a little bit more realistic effect when you have only the corner or part of it spinning, or you could switch it up and do it different ways. One good thing to do while you're doing this is reference actual wind chime paper flipping in the wind, see how it goes. It moves really quickly, so we're actually kind of exaggerating this a little bit, slowing it down, but it's always good to actually reference the thing that you're drawing or animating, and then you can change it however you want. So here is really when it's so thin and horizontal that we can't actually see it, but we're going to give it this little effect of just seeing a tiny bit. It may look weird just looking at it as a drawing like that, but when you actually show it animating and you see the frame that comes after, it's going to look a lot more natural. So now we're through the horizontal kind of slit keyframe, going back into another figure 8. So this is coming out on the other side of the flip. And you can see I drew a little bit more on the bottom, so giving it some variation. I didn't do the exact same type of figure 8 as the other one because I wanted to change it up a little bit, but still kept it so there's more on the top half. Alright, let's look at that so far. So that looks good. That almost looks like it could be its own little animation there. And I'm noticing I missed one of the little strings here. That's another thing why it's really good to always play back every frame or two that you draw, and then you can see there's a weird kind of bulge going on. I think it's maybe here. Yeah. I won't focus too much on cleaning everything up here, but if there's anything that stands out a lot, try and fix it as we go. Now I'm going to move this so we have more frames that we can see. And so now we have the main part done there. And as you can see, I gave this frame, this cell right here, 3 frames, so it's animated on 3s. And what I wanted to do is just give it that little bit more kind of dangling in the air effect. Give it a little bit more time to show on screen. And then we're we're gonna flip back over here. And so you can see this went straight back to actually one of the, just the straight on. We really could add another one, like frame 4. We could add another one there where it's like slightly turning. So that'd be another thing to think about if you wanted to give it a little bit more detail, or something you can do later on as you're cleaning up, or in the brainstorming phase. But for now, we're just gonna follow the guideline that we have. And so as you can see, we've gone up, done the figure 8, oops, and then now we're going back down this way a little bit, kind of coming back and going straight on. So let's draw that. And the reason the animation doesn't just stop here and just doesn't loop there is because I wanted to give a little bit of the effect of, after it flips, it does that kind of figure 8 motion and kind of dangles back and forth a little bit to kind of give that effect of, I guess you would say, inertia, but just give it a little bit more of a natural, so it's not just looping infinitely in a gust of wind, as probably wouldn't really actually be doing that in real world. So as you can see, now we're going back to the left here, angled slightly. I'm going to turn that bottom guide layer off for now. Oops, I think I forgot. No, I got it. Okay. And, you know, this is where you can get kind of picky about your spacing of the paper where it's going to be. It's hard to show really subtle motion, especially if you're not using that many frames. And one thing, if you do want to show that kind of subtle animation, is to add more frames too. So if you're animating everything on 3s and you want to show it just slightly moving over a small period of time, a really good thing to do would be to, for that section where you want to show the more detailed animation, add more frames and draw it in that way. So you can see we have our frames already here from the leftover that we kept in. And then so now, as you can see, we went up, figure 8, went down, and now we're kind of going back again. And then that's where we're going to do a small comeback, and then it's going to be back to the starting position there. Alright, so we're almost done. Let's just fill in these last few frames here, and then we'll take a look at it and see if there's anything that we need to particularly fix or clean up. Yeah. Right, so just following that guide that we drew already. And this is why it really helps to have a rough pass and clean it up and just make sure, you know, by the time you're doing the final cleanup on all of your animation, you're really kind of just going over things and making it look as clean as possible, or making it look how you want it to look, whatever style or effect you're going for. Sometimes, if you know, it doesn't have to be super clean. If that's not what you're going for, that's fine. I like a little bit of wavy lines and not super pristine clean lines for animation, partly because I'm not the best at that, so kind of leaning into my weaknesses, and luckily it's actually a style that I actually like as well, so that definitely helps. But you can feel a lot of pressure to make things perfect and clean in illustration and animation, and I definitely struggled with that for a long time. And it's an important thing not to use as a cop-out. But if it's something that you like, if it's a style that you actually enjoy and enjoy making, then there's nothing wrong with it. There's a lot of animation out there that a lot of people might regard as dirty or not clean, kind of scrappy. But I think there's a lot of charm in that. And it's actually a style that I prefer. So that's good. Alright, now you can see for these last few frames, we've basically just been going back to the left, getting closer and closer to the starting position. If you can turn the guide on, you can see, yep, We're almost there. And the thing here too is if you wanted to make it a perfect looped animation, what you would do is basically make it so that your very first frame is the exact same as the last frame, and that would make the loop perfect and just super smooth. We're not doing a perfect loop here. As you can see, the first frame and the last frame are just slightly off, but it's partly because it's coming back in this way. If you wanted to make it a perfect loop, you could literally just copy and paste the first frame. So it's as easy as that. All right, now let's take a look at it. I'm gonna turn off that bottom other guideline layer that we had. Okay, so immediately notice I missed a string there. So we'll fix that. But otherwise, you know, yeah, I think it's looking pretty good. I like it. I like how it looks. Now, granted, we're basically just going over the layer that we already had, but this is how I made it whenever I did the first one. You know, just going over a very rough pass, and then I cleaned that up a little bit. Now it's almost like we cleaned that up again, kind of made it how we wanted it. And so what you would do here at this point, if you wanted to, you know, the chime is already colored in. But you could go in here, add some color to the little paper flag, and as you can see here, I had some fun with it. I actually created a gradient that I put in the background and kind of like masked over each frame, or masked underneath so that it doesn't come through the background. And that gave it a cool little, you know, iridescent gradient effect. And that's definitely something I could also go over in another video. So I'll see if I can make another one kind of touching on that, or doing some coloring or easy ways to color your frames when you're animating. But yeah, I think that's gonna about do it for this video. One thing that you could start doing, the other animation how-to videos I have right now are the falling leaves and the sparkles. So one cool thing to do would be to start combining some of those, and I think this would be a perfect example. If you have the wind chime here and you animated some sparkles around that and some falling leaves, I think it would look pretty cool. So maybe I'll try and add all three of those together in a separate project or video. But for now, yeah, thanks a lot for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace. What's up, guys? Thanks for watching the video. I do want to give a quick shout out and a little reminder that I do have some animated streaming screens over on Etsy. So if you want to see how I use these types of animations in my own work, you can go and check those out. Any kind of support is super appreciated. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.